Today, I'm breaking down habits of highly creative thinkers, and this is a very fascinating and involved list. It's really digging into not only how can we be more creative, but how do we think about our work and our play and our lives overall. I have another video here where I break down 10 ways to be more creative. So if you're looking for really hands-on, like smaller, simple, daily things you can do literally just to exercise that muscle and be more creative, that's a great video. If you're looking for some overarching concepts, then this is the one you want to be watching. And these are all in depth enough that I am hoping to do a separate video for probably each one listed here because there's so much to dig into. But today I'm going to give kind of a quick overview of these nuclear habits that make a really big difference in our lives. I want to start first by touching briefly on some cognitive processes. So I think most of us are familiar with the idea that creativity takes place on the right side of our brains and more analytical executive thinking on the left. But of course, that is an oversimplification, especially when you get far into either kinds of thinking. So if you're looking at really deeply creative work, it's using both. There's a lot of executive functioning going on as well. And if you're doing really seriously problem solving, that's getting creative as well. So I want to think of it more in terms of processes or functions. So we have a part of our brain or an action in our brain that's more like the default network. And it's given that term because this is kind of the thinking and the patterns we fall into when we're not working on a very specific task. So anytime we aren't really focused on something clear in that way, our brains are working on assimilating information we've taken in throughout the day, reviewing experiences we've had. We may be reflecting on our thoughts or feelings. It's a very synthesized way of thinking, right? We're processing, we're taking in information and sort of making sense of what we've experienced. Then on the other side, we have the executive control, and this is very clear planning and really deliberate problem solving. We're being very analytical and saying, what do I need in order to get this task completed? And the interesting thing is that highly creative thinkers, they're very adept at switching back and forth between both. So it's this sort of mental elasticity and strengthening a muscle where they're really good at using both brain functions almost at the same time. So when we're talking about creative thinking in this context, it's not simply about being able to write a song or paint a picture. It's really a way of thinking overall and a level of intelligence and problem solving and sort of quick thinking, and how do we bring new ideas together in a very synthesized an original manner. So this is a useful thing for all humans, whether your work is creative or not. Okay, so now let's get to the list. I'm going to break down 10 habits that highly creative thinkers are found to have in common. The first one is imaginative play. So imagination is when we're creating things in our minds that we don't have before our eyes, and we can pretty easily see how this is a very useful skill for any kind of problem solving, looking towards the future. If you want to get somewhere, you need to be able to imagine what that place will look like. So imaginative play, where we're putting ourselves in a circumstance or a place that is not our own, especially in this idea of play is where it's kind of an effortless, fun activity, is where we're learning and creating rapidly and easily, rather effortlessly. And this idea of play is something that is really lacking in many of our workplaces today, and it does a lot to unlock our minds. And we can see these people who are dedicated to doing creative work, they will give themselves time and permission to play in their day. Number two, they pursue their passion, and I want to talk about what this means. It can mean that you dedicate your entire career and your life to one thing that you absolutely love, and there can be a place for that. I think there's been some criticism of the concept lately because it can also mean not really being connected to reality or understanding the challenges that will go with something like that. What I really want to talk about for the habit in this context is more like being aware, being sensitive to the things that you really love. What is it that kind of gets your spark going, that makes you feel more connected, more involved, more interested in the world around you? I have a friend who's a real water bug. She loves to swim. There's something about being in the water for her that's really fun and captivating. And I would think it's an important thing for her to try and do semi-regularly. It helps her open up her mind. So what are the things you really love? Maybe you love working with your hands and you're kind of a tactile person. Maybe you love going out and eating some kind of new food that you haven't tried before. Maybe you love listening to classical music and you can play that while you work, but we need to be aware of the things we really enjoy and again, give ourselves permission to do that sometimes because so much of creativity comes from a relaxing and a simple enjoyment and again, this idea of play. So if we know what it is we love and we can pursue that a little bit, it will allow us to be more creative as well. The third one is daydreaming. Totally goes with this idea of relaxing. When we give ourselves time and permission to let our minds wander a little bit, it allows for a really free, unlocked exploration in our minds, and we will solve problems again without thinking of it. Many of us today feel guilty if we aren't somehow on task during all of our waking hours, and we feel like we are wasting time as soon as we step away from that. If every time we step away from our work, we are plugged into a device, we're watching TV, we're scrolling on our phones, those generally don't help as much with creative thinking. We want to give ourselves time to be in this relaxed but active state in our minds, and that will lead to more creativity as well. So daydreaming once in a while can be a very good thing. Habit number 4 is having moments of solitude. And this is something that we think of for the stereotypical artists, that they spend a lot of time alone, thinking and being creative. And there's something to that. When we are around other people, which is a good, wonderful thing to do, we're very social beings. We are taking in a ton of information and we are sharing a ton of information with others. But what we are not doing so much is this processing and sort of taking in the information and synthesizing it and giving ourselves time to make new connections. So you can see a theme throughout these habits in that many of these do have to do with giving ourselves time and space to activate this default network. We want to be less dialed in to being totally active, really intensely working or intensely taking in stimulus all the time. Give our minds that space to do this other work. And being alone is an important part of that sometimes. The fifth one I'm going to refer to as intuition, and it has to do with the difference between fast thinking and slow thinking, or the difference between generating new ideas and then exploring them later. So I know I just talked about how so much of what we do in these habits has to do with giving our brains time to sort of explore in an easy, relaxed way. But we also want to be able to do this in a high energy, spit out ideas, basically brainstorming kind of session. And something important here is giving ourselves permission to come up with lots of bad ideas. So that's what the intuition is doing here. It's saying this might work, this might work, this might. And many of us have a habit of pushing down ideas before we've tried them out because we don't think they'll work and we don't want to be embarrassed when we come up with a bad idea. But we need to have a space where we can come up with lots of ideas and maybe never share them with anyone, but at least come up with them. Maybe literally at least write them down on paper or acknowledge them for ourselves. And this is something that will help us to be much more creative because we will be looking at more options. So this idea of following your intuition without judging it right away, that's kind of the key point here. The next one, number 6, is openness to experience. And it's kind of self-explanatory. We need to be able to take in many different kind of experiences in our lives if we want to be generating new ideas and ways of thinking. If we fall really into one narrow lane and we just stay there for all of our work life and our personal life, we're not going to be growing very much and we won't be as creative. So we want to be open to new experience. The next one is mindfulness, and that is this idea of being very present in the moment, not worrying all the time about the future or dwelling on the past, but trying to stay right where we are, doing the work we're doing or having whatever fun activity or relaxed activity we're doing, be very much at the forefront of our thinking. And it allows us to simply have richer experiences and draw more meaning from them. So we want to practice being present in the moment. The next one is sensitivity. And again, this is something we see predominantly in very creative people, is they tend to be very aware of what's going on around them, how other people are feeling. They can often maybe feel overwhelmed by emotions easily. And this, off the bat, is a character trait. People naturally tend to be more or less sensitive just as they are as individuals. So if you feel like you're a less sensitive person, meaning you don't tend to get overwhelmed by your emotions and you're not always taking in tons of data about how other people are feeling, it is something we can practice. We can deliberately seek out ways to be more sensitive. And a lot of it has to do with imagining what might be going on in another person's life or how they might be feeling, so we can practice empathy. Another one is literally being more sensitive to what we are physically feeling and experiencing. So slowly eating your sandwich for lunch and thinking about what is the process of chewing this, right? Being more aware of how your clothes feel on your body. This sounds kind of silly or strange. It's something I had to do in my acting classes at school. We want to practice sensitivity because it helps us relate more, it helps us draw more depth from our experiences, and it helps us to be more creative. So if you struggle as a highly sensitive person and you feel frequently overwhelmed, you wish you didn't have so much data coming in, rest assured it serves a purpose. There is definitely a silver lining to those struggles. And if you feel like you're not very sensitive and it makes it harder for you to be creative, know that it's something you can practice and develop. The next one is growing from adversity. We need to be able to see the challenges we face as tools for growth rather than experiences that are going to cause trauma and really hinder our ability to move forward. Again, across the board for intensely creative people, they have a lot of experiences being shut down and being rejected and not having success. And the key is to take that and say, okay, I'm going to learn from this. What can I grow out of this circumstance? How can I develop my craft, develop my work, or just develop myself as a person so that I don't feel completely knocked down? So we always want to grow from adversity. And the last one is to be open to thinking differently, and this makes complete sense. It's hard to practice this kind of mental elasticity where we're often adding in new ways of thought or ideas that are foreign to us, but it makes for such strong, intelligent, creative ways of thinking. So if we can deliberately read books that push against our set opinions already, or have some people in our social circle we know we disagree with, who we can have like open, friendly debates with, and really listen to what they're saying as well. Not go through the motions, but actually listen, actually challenge ourselves regularly. It's hard, it's like working a muscle, but it helps in all our ways of thinking and living, and definitely in being creative as well. So it is kind of an intense list, but I hope you found it helpful and certainly interesting. I think it's absolutely fascinating that all of these can be connected back to creativity. Keep an eye out in the future because I will be breaking down these concepts more in depth because they deserve it. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, go ahead, give it a thumbs up, and I will see you next time.